He has been requested by a few folks on social media. Now I get to have him join us on our On the Mark podcast and visually as well for those folks on YouTube and on my website, markimmelman.com. It's Jon Adler. Hello there, Jon. How are you doing?
Hi, Mark. I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you. I appreciate you changing your schedule to get on with us. That's very kind. All right, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this all, Jon, let's talk about you. Let's put you into context for our global audience. Tell the folks a little bit about Jon Adler, please.
Okay, well, I started coaching about 20 years ago now. Started coaching just regular folks, business people. And I learned about non-directed questioning and that sort of thing, and that was very useful. And at the same time, I stopped playing soccer. I had a knee injury, and I started playing golf. So I became interested in the same principles I was using with my business clients would work with golf. And I started to explore what role the mind had. I was lucky enough to be invited by Sir John Whitmore and Timothy Galway to a tennis course exploring the inner game of tennis.
Yeah, I was about to say, because I've read the Galway book, The Inner Game of Golf.
Yes. So it was based on that, but it was a tennis setup, and me being the only non-tennis player there, it was mainly tennis pros. I was the guinea pig, so they were using me for the bounce hit exercise. And then I went home and used it on my golf game, and I dropped a lot of shots pretty quickly. And that got me really interested in how the mind then affects performance and focusing, concentration, and that became my interest.
Okay.
I started to try and explore more for myself how I could improve my focus and concentration. I know, a lot of golf commentators, probably including yourself, say when it's coming down the stretch, these guys have got to focus, they've got to concentrate. But I couldn't, for the life of me, find a course I could do that I could learn and develop that. So the only sort of thing I'd come across was the Eastern sort of martial arts things. They sort of pointed you towards it. So I traveled to the Buddhist temples and into India, into the ashrams. And I got a bit of information, but I eventually found something which is a thing called Vipassana meditation, 10 days of silent meditation.
Okay.
And I did that for 10 days. And I learned more in 10 days of silence about the reality of what my mind's like than I did in all the other courses together. And I began to put that into not only just my coaching, but also my golf game. I practice it myself. I still play. I'm an amateur golfer. I want to know what it feels like to be anxious. And I had some success with it. So my principles come from my own experience. It's not just something I've read. And so I've put those principles into my coaching practice. Now I've been fortunate to work with elite golfers and with lots of amateurs. And I get a kick out of helping them both do just the same.
So you've now learned a lot about yourself. Now you're getting into the work with clients and such. I'm fascinated, coming from a guy who's given golf lessons since 1996, I think it was. You're a lot less gray than I am. You must be pretty at peace with what you do, Jon.
Well, I do love my work. I've got to say that. I did it for free for many years because I'm not a golf psychologist, even though I work in that field. And neither am I a golf pro. I'm not a professional teacher, but I'm a performance coach. So in the beginning, I basically had to give it away because clients were hard to come by.
Okay.
In fact, I started very much attracting the people who couldn't find anybody to help them, which is people with the yips, full swing yips, and chipping and putting yips. And they would come to me. They didn't have anywhere else to go. I mean, pros really sort of scratch their head. Psychologists, apart from saying, well, put your shoulders back and be a bit more positive, they didn't know what to do. So they came to me and they were sort of in the last chance saloon, really just about to give it up. And who should they see in the saloon at the bar was me, with open arms, welcoming them in so that I could explore and learn. And I still do a lot of work with yippers to this day. And in my mind, the sort of mental interference that Galway mentioned, a yipper is the same as a top pro blocking his tee shot on 18. It's mental interference.
Is it that simple? I mean, I want you to build on that for a while because it's to me, I've worked with players with the yips. I've been around players with the yips, And it seems like that sort of career ending sort of a thing. And then, like you say, you're equating this to a professional elite golfer just blocking a tee shot off to the right. Is it really that simple? It find that, I'm sure the folks listening find that so hard to believe.
Well, if they've been playing well for 71 holes,
Hmm.
on the last hole, now what is it? They lost their skill, or is there some sort of mental interference going on? I mean, it's a smaller scale,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing. A yip is a grand form of it. But to me, it's just a similar type of mental interference. There's been some interference in the mind, and whether that comes from doubt or craving it too much, wanting the result too much, or fear of messing up, that interferes with their ability to concentrate. And this is one of the things that I discovered in these 10 days of silence, that the differences that make the difference are very subtle and are easily overlooked.
Tell me about these 10 days of silence. And I want to visit this subject just a second ago, but well, actually, no, let me, I want to build on the point that you made. And then I want to talk about the 10 days of silence. You can see me writing over here. Um, a few weeks ago, this is in 2021 because this is a podcast and I shouldn't date things, but I was on the course for CBS, and it's down in New Orleans at the Zurich Classic of New Orleans. And folks, we go to a playoff. It's between Louis Oosthuizen and Charles Schwartzel versus, I'm having a moment, Mark Leishman and Cameron Smith.
Yes.
And in regulation play, the South Africans, Louis is on the tee. It's alternate shot. And Louis hits not a bad hook, but he hits a hook in the left rough. They can't get to the green. And they make par five and they go to the playoff. Now, in the playoff, 18 is a par five, sort of slides gently to the right hand side, bunkers down the left rough, and water all the way down the right hand side. Now, they come to Louis, who's on the tee again, and the host sends it down to me, and I set this shot up by going, well, in regulation play, he missed this one left, and then I make some quip about, well, it's about, clearing your mind, getting to the shot at hand, trying to put the past in the past and just being right here. So I sort of, some sort of version of that, I said. And lo and behold, here's Louis, blasts one into Kingdom Come on the right, straight in the water. The playoff's done, essentially.
Really?
Where there's and it's almost like I saw this unfolding in my head before we went there. He'd hit the hook off the tee in regulation. They make five. Now you try and challenge the right side. He overcompensates, even though it's 20 minutes later, 30 minutes into the water on the right. I want you to go there with me a little bit because that's because you said that was on the 73rd hole of play where up to then Louis had been downright sublime off the tee with a driver.
Well, there you go. You see, I mean, I can't obviously get into Louis' mind, fantastic player, but there was obviously some sort of interference, and he wouldn't be human if there wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if you play golf, even as an amateur like myself, there are good times, but there are times where you just get a kick in the butt.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is, and that's why we love the game. I think, even though we can all do our best to stay present and to clear our mind and focus on what we want, interference, the mind is always worried about something. It likes to be getting involved in things that it doesn't need to, worrying about what's about to happen. And I think a lot of the time, if you're frightened about what's going to happen, you can't pay enough attention to what is happening. And that's where we lose concentration and performance drops. I mean, I'm sure you could say there's some sort of technical problem. And a lot of the people I see, and a lot of the professionals certainly that I've worked with, they're always looking for problems in technique,
Mm-hmm.
always looking for a technical problem. Whereas actually, they broke down before the technique did. And to me, it's a bit like losing your keys in the basement, but looking for them upstairs because the light's better.
Yeah, amen. Here's me, a golf instructor, and this is why I was looking forward to this conversation with you because I'm saying to golfers all the time because I come at it from a physical realm, and perhaps the one of the origins of this podcast was the fact that I've eventually, in my 50 years of wisdom, let's call it, come to the understanding that golf and most things are holistic. There's more to it than just your hands and your feet, because every signal, is coming from your mind, every physical signal. And so I love that term of interference. Now, to that, the 10 days of silence, as you call them, right? Quickly describe that for us. And And because in my mind, I'm imagining you off to some monastery somewhere in Tibet with a robe on. Was it talk
No.
about this 10 days of silence? Because I think a lot of us nowadays in 2021 and beyond could probably use and benefit from some of this.
Oh, I think everyone can benefit from it. And no, I went searching all around for this place, but it was in Hereford, which is a sort of sleepy little place on a
Okay.
Welsh border. Um, but yes, I went. Someone mentioned it to me, and when I thought about going for 10 days of silent meditation,
Yeah.
I could feel fear in me. I thought I could just feel the fear, and I thought, well, what am I frightened of? I cannot be frightened of silence and myself for 10 days. So I thought,
True.
well, but I could feel it. I mean, and my mind was coming up with all sort of, I couldn't possibly do that. No, I wouldn't. I'm too busy. But I thought, well, listen, I've got to go. And I went in with an open mind. And how they described it, Mark, was they said that when you go in, your mind is like the surface of a choppy pond, let's say, choppy water.
Okay.
And during the course of the 10 days, the surface of the water will become still as your mind settles down. And then at the end of the 10 days, all the mud and the silt will sink to the bottom. And you'll be able to see the roots of the weeds that are growing and reach down and pull out the roots of the weeds in your own mind. And so that got me interested.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is you go in and what they do is they close all your sense doors down. That's the idea. Is the mind is always looking for something to distract it. So they try to close all the sense doors down. So it's silence the whole time you're there. You can't take any books or have any music or anything like that. There are other people there, but you keep your eyes down. No eye contact. Your eyes are closed for 10 hours a day when you're meditating.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's no aftershaves or perfume, so there's no smells, no sound. You don't touch anybody. So they're closing all the sense doors so the mind can't escape and get interested in something.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of those 10 days, you go through some suffering, but when you come out of the suffering, it can be a magical experience, and that's what I found it to be. I went in with a very open mind. I didn't have a clue what I was going to find, and it changed everything. It changed a lot of things for the better, I must say.
Well, you've coined the phrase, and it's on your website, folks. You can go and check it out. Golfisamindgame.com. You've coined the phrase golf. Well, you just talked about the art of relaxed concentration. Is this a skill that you developed during this time?
Yes. So being able to place your attention where you want it, I found, it was a big part of the golf industry. They would often talk about sort of where you place your attention. Is it internal or external? As if that was the end of the discussion, really. But to me, there was a lot more about how you place your attention. The manner in which you pay attention to things, how you attend to things, influences greatly the way you view the world.
Yeah.
For example, people will be listening to this now, or you're going to be listening or watching this, and they'll be paying attention in one certain way. But there's also an opportunity for you to expand that awareness from just the words that you're hearing to whatever you're looking at. And if you're looking at a screen, you can look beyond the screen and look at your peripheral vision and open that up and start to pay attention to perhaps what you're sitting on, the feeling of your body on the chair or your feet on the floor. You pay attention in lots of different ways, not always consciously, but there's always some connection. So that got me, that's an interesting part of it. Where do we place our attention when we're swinging the golf club? And even more than that, I suppose, it's who turns up to pay attention. Which version of you is paying attention?
Okay.
I would imagine the version of Louis who turned up on that playoff hole was a different version of himself that was on the front nine.
Yeah.
See, and that's the difference, but it's very subtle and it's easily overlooked because golf's a difficult game, and even when when we don't like things, things aren't going our way in golf, we don't like it, and that causes a resistance in the mind, that causes unbalance.
Interesting.
So somehow, I think we've got to meet the moment that we're trying to focus in the sort of reality that this could be tough. Because if we don't, then there's always going to be a disappointment. and that will cause tension. Because how we relate to the moment will define our experience of it, I think.
I love that because I read it somewhere and I've sort of taken ownership of it. And I make the quip, and folks will look at me, and then you can see they register after a while. And the anecdote is that tension is the biggest wrecker of a golf swing in the world. And people instantaneously think of that in the physical realm. But you're talking about just the tension mentally and the distraction, if you will, and not being as present as you should be when you're playing. Am I summarizing this well enough?
Yeah, I think you summarised it very well. There's what happens is I think your body is in the present moment, and your mind is worrying about what's about to happen or what could happen. And in the gap, that's where anxiety builds.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. Well, that sort of, I guess that's the perfect segue to, a few of the things I want to highlight because you wrote a book a ways back. You've actually got a few ebooks, and the one is Golf Psychology. And one of the folks who follow us on social media had read this book, and they reached out to me on a direct message and said, "This book's changed my life. And you've got to get John on because I want to hear what he has to say." And so, lo and behold, this conversation. And there's a few little elements from the book I want to touch just to highlight some of them. And one of them was playing your best when it matters. And me being an instructor of elite players, back in the day, and now being an announcer of the best in the game, the ability to bring out your best when it counts is a separator, but no one really knows how to do it. And most folks listening to this, I'm sure, your best coming out is like, I'm not sure, it might just happen, and then I might have it for a while, and it goes away. So I'm keen on your take and to share maybe some insight or two, a little bit.
Yes, well, I think, looking at golfers in general, I mean, it does come and go. It's not easy to pin this thing down,
Hmm.
its ability to perform when it really matters. But I think you probably know much better than me. There's so many good golfers who travel around on these different tours, but only a few seem to be able to show their ability when it really matters. And I guess that they have an innate ability to just be able to switch on, focus in the right way
Okay.
when it matters. It's not a skill problem. There's lots, I'm sure you know plenty of golfers who've got a huge amount of skill. They can't translate it into performance. So yeah, being able to play your best golf when it matters. There's something about accepting that there will be some suffering before you even start. I remember listening to a couple of the winners
You,
lately,
I,
Dustin
I, I
Johnson.
want to interject for a second. That statement you made there, you're actually the bearer of bad tidings. But with that statement, if people honestly grapple onto it, and I want you to say it again, I think that could be what really unshackles them and helps them to bring out their best because they'll be prepared for whatever this golf course and this contest or whatever it is might have in store for them.
Well, isn't that the reality of golf? We really never know exactly what's going to happen. We have
Hmm.
to embrace the certainty of uncertainty in order to be able to, deal with reality as it is. Otherwise, we're entering into this important tournament or the medal or whatever it is with an idea of how we'd like reality to be, and there's already a conflict. I want reality to be this way, and reality doesn't always agree with you. And if you argue with reality, my experience is that you lose every time. So Dustin Johnson and who was the other chap, Morikawa, after they were interviewed when they recently, did they both win majors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Very interesting to me afterwards. They said you looked pretty calm out there, Dustin, and he said, no, I was nervous the whole way round. And Colin Morikawa said exactly the same thing. I was nervous the whole way round. They'd accepted that they were going to be scared. They didn't waste their energy trying to get rid of it. They didn't think there was a problem with them and that they shouldn't be feeling it. They just said, let it be there. Now let me get on with what I want to do. I want to play golf. Let me see if I can focus my attention on where I want to, play with as much freedom as I can, knowing that this fear was going to probably try and mess them up now and again, and there would be some suffering. They'd accepted the suffering beforehand. I like that.
Yeah. And I think at a real deeper level, I will let you quote on this because you probably know a lot more than I do, but the body responds with fight or flight, whether you're excited or whether you're fearful. And if you're
Yeah.
like, all right, well, what I'm feeling is anxiety or fear, my body's adrenalizing anyway. So, to a funny extent, if I just get over like you say, the focusing on the fear as opposed to the focusing on the job at hand, all of a sudden you'll redirect all of that stuff, biologically that's happening,
Mm,
and turn that into a weapon of sorts, right?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I mean, from my own experience, and as a handicapped golfer, I still have to play to know that it's possible to play with anxiety
Hmm.
and with fear, but it'll come and go. It passes if you can tune into it and don't try and change it and just observe it non-judgmentally. It's tricky. A lot of people think there's something wrong. I shouldn't be feeling this way. There's nothing wrong, and they waste energy trying to stop it.
Uh,
I mean, there's no problem in bringing your mind back to the present from time to time and being back in your body. But don't think there's anything wrong and start to panic, because that's what does happen. Then you panic. Um, Accepting the reality that it doesn't have to be fun to be fun. Sometimes I heard that the other week, and I thought that was great.
that's quotable. It doesn't have to be fun to be fun. Yeah, I'm going to use that other quote of yours: embrace the certainty of uncertainty. And another thing that you touched on in the book, there were various subjects. I have not read the book, incidentally, but I plan to. You talked about having less frustration when you're out on the golf course. Now, I find golf uncanny because you talk to golfers and you ask them, why do you play golf? And they're like, well, I do it for the relaxation of it. Then you watch them on the golf course and they're everything but relaxed. And they're angry, they're sad, they're emotional, they're mad. You run the gamut of emotions in 4.5 hours or whatever it is. So I'm really curious to hear from you, to at least try and remove some of the frustration from this whole golf thing.
Well, I mean, everyone's slightly different, obviously, and they'll all have their different reasons for being frustrated. But I think most golfers will have an overemphasis on the score. So if you ask them, what's your intention for this round? It'll be to shoot a good score.
Hmm.
So that's either a yes or a no. Then at the end of the round, there'll be nothing to learn from. There's no learning going on while you're there. You can't develop yourself. It's just, did I shoot a good score or didn't I?
Yeah.
So I always suggest maybe set a different intention for the round. What do you need to improve on? Do you need to improve on anger? If so, observe your anger. See if you can let go of your anger. Make that a goal for your round. Do you have trouble accepting your bad shots? If so, make an intention. So see if I can let go of my bad shots a little bit quicker.
Hmm.
Having different intentions other than the score, because let's face it, if we could control the score, then we just put 63 down and go and have a beer in the bar. I wouldn't bother.
Be easier, wouldn't it? Yeah. Uh-huh.
So we can't control the score, but you may have some control over the way you react to everything that's happening. And I would suggest making those different intentions, and as well as that, accepting that golf is a really tough game. It's a game with really fine margins, and so instead of I'll ask people what sort of things they say to themselves, and they say some horrible things to themselves
Yeah.
after a bad shot. And I said, can you imagine if you were um, caddying for a young lad, and every time he made a mistake, you spoke to him the way you speak to yourself? How do you think he performed? And that often puts a light bulb on. And they go, yeah, actually, I get what you mean. I said, well, that's what you're doing. You're doing it to yourself, and we all do. But so some self-compassion, I think, is called for, especially when we play golf, the toughest game. We rarely get what we want. Just accept it.
You should double as a minister, the Reverend Jon Adler preaching right now. I love that. Um, one of the subjects in here was developing a calm mind. Now, to me, is there such a thing as a calm mind? You referenced Dustin Johnson, and I've had the pleasure. I know him. I've had the pleasure of calling his golf a little bit, and he is one of those where the he always looks so calm. But you highlighted that you'd seen the quote where he said he was nervous the entire time, but he just looks awfully disinterested in success or failure when he plays. And it's a
Mm.
wonderful place to be. He hits each shot on its own merit. Sometimes he
Mm.
hits shots when he's not even completely prepared. I've watched him hit shots where he's pulled the trigger before his brother and caddy Austin has had the yardage ready for him because Dustin's like, oh, let's just go, all right? And it shows you a guy that's just like, it's just one shot. It's not going to define my existence. And And in a funny way, it's like the perfect way to play the game in a strange way. So he looks like he has the calm mind, or is it just less concern for what might happen?
Well, I think that probably that is leading you towards a calm mind, less concerned about what's about to happen and being
Hmm.
more present to what is happening. It makes for good golf. I think we're all guilty as a race of overthinking. There's so much information around. It's not a lack of knowledge, but it's a lack of application of some of the simple knowledge, which is don't overthink it.
Hmm.
Keep it simple. Keep connected to what's important, and set the right intentions, and go and play. And I think letting go of unwanted thoughts and sticky trains of thoughts, which like donated in the water and all these sorts of sticky thoughts, I call them, that seem to plague us repeatedly. I think you can learn to develop the skill to let go of thoughts a bit quicker, and this is what the passionate did.
How do you, that sounds so great on the exterior, but I want to dive into the weeds a bit with that observation, the letting go of thoughts, because you've talked about the yips. Um, Yes, golfer A standing over a putt shot, and there's just no way from 4 feet that this ball is going to touch the hole. So how does golfer A step out of this and go, well, I'm going to let this go and get to the business at hand? Are there tricks, tools, or is this just practice all of the time and getting yourself more into the present and the doing of it?
Yeah, I don't know tricks or tools. There are tools. I mean, for my part, being able to bring my mind back to the present moment is a skill that I developed in the passion in these 10 days of silent
Okay.
meditation. So I'd always recommend a little meditation practice, even if it's only 10 minutes a day.
All right.
Just because it's all you're doing is setting an intention to pay attention to something, let's say your breath, and noticing when you're there. And when you disappear, your mind always comes up with a thought, doesn't take long. And noticing it and then bringing yourself back.
Ah, okay.
It's so useful for golf to let go of, I just hit a bad shot. I'm pissed off. Can't say that. But, I'm angry because I missed the green, and just to be able to go, okay, I'm letting that thought go, and I'm going to bring myself back to the present again, back to the moment. That's a skill that you can develop, and that's for the yipper over that 4 foot putt. He has to accept that he may well miss. If he dreads missing or he's desperate to make it,
Yeah.
his mind is already unbalanced. You have to be realistic but optimistic. Well, I may well miss, but I could make it. Now, what shall I pay attention to? Where shall I direct my attention? What's going to be the best way to focus? What's going to be the best thing for me to focus on, or things, as I make my stroke, so that my mind doesn't interfere with my body's innate ability to self-organize and play the shot.
Yeah. I think I've found the title for this podcast. Keeping a balanced mind in the game, because you've referenced having an unbalanced mind a few times. Um, and it's a lovely way to describe it, because at sometimes it's just mayhem inside there and things are moving fast. I mean, I can see that with golfers when you reference the term panic. When panic sets in, movements are animated. They might go through their routine, but it's empty. It's like they're on autopilot. And then when things are going well, it's like everything is good with the world, and the intention is there and the focus is there. But and then all of a sudden, that's fleeting, like you said, it goes in and out. And then the next thing, they're in this place where it's like disaster, and my world's coming to an end. And it's
Yeah,
so crazy because there's so many times in golf when the golfer playing with a big lead is the guy who's probably struggling mentally the most, because as soon as someone cuts into that lead, it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Instead of going, well, dang, I've still got a three stroke lead. It might just not be four right now. We saw that
yeah,
in this year's Masters with the Deki Matsuyama.
yeah, yes. Dealing with those mental pressures, I think, but I think we can all mess it up. I mean, I don't think anyone's got the maybe Tiger in his pomp, but
Hmm.
anyone's got the divine right to just have it one way. It's like life. Sometimes the chips fall your way, and sometimes they don't. But
Yeah.
if you have an idea of how you get in your own way, then I think you've got a better chance of sort of being able to focus and concentrate. And what you said about golfers doing their pre-shot routines, I've watched golfers from, when they're playing really well and when they're playing really poorly, going through the routine, and you couldn't tell the difference between
Yeah.
whether they were playing poorly or well. So it's not the routine, it's not how many waggles you have, it's which version of you is doing the routine. Who turns up? Is it the one who's scared of losing his card or desperate to win, or is it the one who is a word I love to use in my book has got equanimity,
Yeah.
just an equanimous mind, and sometimes players get it when you hear about people they're playing for their grandfather who just passed away or something beyond the game gives
Yeah.
it a different meaning and they get a different perspective and they're able to realize that it's just a game and I'm just going to play, and that sometimes brings people back around, but you don't have to wait for that. There are things you can do, talking to somebody like me perhaps, or anybody who can just put some perspective on things so you can
So true.
get back to it.
Folks who are watching this will see that I'm scribbling feverishly. The folks who are listening on audio, folks, people, I'm making notes nonstop here as Jon is talking to me. There's a couple more points I want to hit, Jon, before I let you go. You've talked about the fear and the anxiety of it. Look, it's a real part of competition. It's a part of life, really. But dealing with it and golfers listening to this, helping themselves to a place where, look, inevitably you're going to feel anxious before a round of golf. I don't care who you are. You'll feel nervous before a golf. That is completely normal. But not allowing that to debilitate you is something that I think it's also a separator. It's what separates the winners from the not so winners. So can you embellish there a little bit, please?
Well, like I said, I think you've got to accept that it may well debilitate you,
Yeah.
but it won't last forever. You can compound it by thinking this shouldn't be happening, or I've got to fix this, I've got to do something. Or you can just observe it and notice that actually I'm feeling really anxious at the moment. Let's see what happens on the next shot. Maybe I've noticed I'm thinking a lot. I'll bring myself back into my body and just just observe my breathing for a while, or my feet as I'm walking down the fairway. But asking yourself, what am I thinking and how am I feeling will bring you back to the present moment. And if I'm feeling anxious, then just be honest and say, I'm anxious. Okay, I've got anxiety with me, but it doesn't necessarily mean I can't play this shot. Now, I'm going to direct all my attention to what I'd like to do. I want to see a good shot, take in the target, keep my swing thoughts simple, or in fact, not thoughts, keep it in my senses, so it's a feeling or a visual or something. Don't overcomplicate it. Trust your body and see what you get, and accept what you get and move on, because the anxiety won't last all the time unless you compound it. If you just observe it non-judgmentally, my experience is that you notice it's there, but if you don't react to it, you watch. It slowly starts to subside.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be able to play for a while, and then perhaps towards the end, when you're doing well again, up it comes again, and you notice that there you are. I was expecting you,
Yeah.
and there it is. And you do your best to continue and play golf. That's what you're there for. But you don't deny it. You can't resist reality. It's just the way it is, but it's okay. People get so worked up about it that they shouldn't be feeling this way and they lose their head. This is where the sort of mindfulness practice can help a little bit. Just bring yourself back to the body. It's just a big thing.
I know of an individual who names the anxiety. They actually struggle with anxiety, but they have a name for it. And it's like, oh, there you are, Jon. Just random name. I'm not saying anything about whatever. It's like, oh, there you are. I recognize you. Now I'm going to go about my business. You can be there. I'm still doing me. Is this a useful way to go about it?
Most people are resisting anxiety and frightened of it. And my take would be to invite it in like an old friend. Say I was expecting you. I knew you were going to come. I'm not frightened of you. Come on in, and I'll watch you. I'm playing golf, and you can do what you've got to do. It's a different take on it. You're not fighting reality.
Well, look, the reality of it is, you're talking to a guy that, any given broadcast, there's millions of folks listening to what we do. And I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't anxious before a show. But you just got to get up there and go. If you're so focused on yourself and the way you might be feeling, who knows the drivel that might come out of my, my mouth.
Well, I said to you before this podcast that I was nervous, and I can feel the nerves in me still. I mean, even though it's not like I'm playing in the medal. But I can feel the nerves, but I can still perform hopefully reasonably and
Yeah.
make myself understood. Um, so it doesn't mean it's the end of the world if you've got nerve anxiety, or it just means that you're doing something that you're interested in and is important to you.
So cool.
The alternative is you're just watching TV, sat at home, scratching your backside. There's no nerve there. And
You know
same for
what?
golf, I guess.
That's something. Now we're moving away from golf, but I believe that golf is a microcosm of life. And this will be my last question, and then we can share for folks where they can find your books and find you and all the rest. Um, Nowadays, with the COVID pandemic, hopefully, some behind us, but
Yeah,
folks were insular, folks were inward, folks were on devices, all that sort of stuff, more and more and more, because we weren't allowed out.
yeah,
You couldn't get into the sun, you couldn't go and
yeah.
exercise, that sort of deal. I almost feel like there's been a proliferation of this sort of like inward, so aware of how I'm feeling kind of thing. And then like you say, then I just laze away and I'm in a device, and that's an escapism from me. And that's like, okay, everything's well with the world. But all of a sudden, when I step out and I step into this different environment, it's like, oh no, I'd rather just get back into my little room and be with myself and be safe. Am I? Are you understanding where I'm going here? Because I see a lot of this sort of stuff.
I am. I struggled on the second lockdown over here too, and I think it's something about what I said in the beginning about paying attention, how we attend to the world.
Hmm.
I think even though it's comforting to be on the device, it's a very narrow sort of focus, and it closes things down in my opinion. Now we're looking at the screen. And if you can contrast that with perhaps I live not far from the beach, and very often I probably will do after this. I'll walk down the beach, and I'll walk down through the pine trees, and I can smell the pine trees. I can hear the sea before I get there, and then I'm on the beach, and you can see the waves. And that broad focus. There's something about that taking in, using all our senses. It can be quite overwhelming once we come out of this small thing. But that is where, in nature, I suppose, like a big a mountain scene or something, when we're involved continually in all our senses, stimulating that, there's almost like a spiritual connection to the world. When you
Hmm.
contrast that with a narrow staring at your phone, there's a different feeling, and actually, there's a change in physiology and muscle tension and respiratory rate, and all sorts of things come a change when we change the way we attend to the world. And that's part of what I do with golfers is find out how they're attending to these shots. How are they using their focus? They're less about what they're focusing on. How are they attending to it, and who's turning up to attend? But I certainly get I feel a little bit overwhelmed getting back on the horse and getting back out there with the world as it is, having been so introverted. So,
Well, fascinating takes, and there's so much more. I'm so thankful to you for your time already, and I know you've helped so many golfers, and I find it sort of curious that a lot of golfers will be watching this on a device. So I'm going to say to you, once you're done with this podcast, and John, and they've looked for you, get out there on the golf course and don't be so about the shot, like you say. I remember the quote by, I believe it might have been Walter Hagen. Along the journey, don't forget to smell the roses out on the golf course,
yes,
where the better you get in golf, the more you're like, well, I got to make this shot better. And all of a sudden it becomes your entire existence when it's just really one shot.
yes. Don't overthink it. Expect some suffering and be happy.
Preach it, brother. Okay, John, where can the folks find you, please? Social media, the website, where can they find the books,
Yes, the
please?
website is golfisamindgame.com. I'm a bit of a Neanderthal when it comes to social media, but I do have a presence on Twitter and Facebook. There's something on there. But yeah, they can always get in touch with me. I'm very easily accessible. Drop me an email and I do telephone coaching sessions over the telephone. I meet people face to face.
So they can find that on the website. What's the social media handles? Where do what's your name on there on Twitter and such?
It'll be golf is a mind game
Golf is
on
mine.
both, I think. Yeah, yeah. As I said, I'm not too au fait on the
Well, it's the
really
one
be out
thing
there
that
doing it, but I'm not great on the social media. But I'm sure they can find me if they want me.
it's the one thing I love about golf is indeed a mind game. My hero Bob Jones called it a game that's played on a 5-inch fairway, that space between your ears. So
That's it.
I appreciate you joining us, certainly to share your insights and help us get that this fairway right here, get it manicured and working a bit better.
I really appreciate you having me on. I've enjoyed your podcast.